And this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, Donald Byrd, his life and times and best hits. During this hour, we're going to be talking about more of his best albums of all time. The first one's called Coffee. This album has a post-pop fusion feel to it, incorporating elements of African music and fusion into American acoustic jazz. With this album, Byrd was trying to bridge the gap between jazz and R&B. The album sees Byrd backed by stellar instrumentalists like Ron Carter and Airto Moreira. Overall, a very atmospheric, funky album. Another album called Off to the Races. This one sees Byrd collaborating with another hard bop legend hailing from his hometown in Detroit, trumpeter Pepper Adams. Also, some of his own compositions make an appearance on this album. An album called Street Lady. This album was recorded in collaboration with a bunch of rising jazz stars, members of Howard University where he graduated from. With this album, he was experimenting with a new sound that incorporated soul, R&B and funk. The music is very nostalgic, featuring stunning electric piano music, percussion, flute music and haunting vocals. The first album is called Coffee. This album has a post-pop fusion feel to it. It incorporates elements of African music and fusion into American acoustic jazz. With this album, Byrd was trying to bridge the gap between jazz and R&B. The album sees Byrd backed by stellar instrumentalists like Ron Carter and Airto Moreira. Frank Foster's saxophone playing and Lou Tacobin's flute melodies are one highlight of the music. A lot of beautiful, relaxing tones on this album. The first two tracks utilize a mix of electric hard bop and funk strains from the late 60s. The album starts off with the title track, a blend of spiritual and world music. This one was an original composition by Byrd. A very imaginative track rooted in hypnotic African-infused rhythms. The drumming by Frank Foster is one highlight. The tune is overall very upbeat, but Donald Byrd enters with some laid-back melancholy soloing. There's another composition called Fufu. This one has a mix of African and Latin themes to it. The other tracks are moody electric grooves with acid jazz themes. Perpetual Lover finds a balance between the romantic and the spacey. Byrd's playing is very emotional here. Frank Foster on tenor saxophone is one highlight. The final song, Elimna, plays out in a Miles Davis style. This one's a party track type song, very funky and gets very intense towards the middle of the track. The material was taken from two previously unreleased sessions from 1969 and 70. Overall, a very atmospheric, funky album. Another album called Off to the Races. This one sees Byrd collaborating with another hard bop legend hailing from his hometown in Detroit, trumpeter Pepper Adams. They started out playing in local clubs in Detroit in the 50s. There's also alto saxophonist Jackie McLean who synchronizes beautifully with his alto saxophone melodies. Adams' playing is very driving and energetic. His hard-edged baritone chimes were unmatched at the time. He's at his best on fast-paced tracks like Lover, Come Back to Me and the title song. His saxophone style was inspired by Charlie Parker. He's also got some great solos that see him improvising beautifully. Donald Byrd at the time of this album had just completed a stint with Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers, and his sound was still evolving at the time, brassy, crackling with energy and very dynamic. He has a great solo on the song Lover, Come Back to Me. Also, some of Byrd's compositions make an appearance on the album. One of them was a nostalgic ballad, When Your Lover Has Gone, which plays out as a quartet song. Two other compositions, sizzling blues songs, Southwest Funk and Down Home. There's also drummer Art Taylor contributing some great grooves and imaginative playing on cymbals. Sam Jones lays down a strong foundation on bass. And an album called Street Lady. This was Byrd's second album released in 1973, following in the footsteps of his vastly successful Blackbird that topped the charts upon release and went on to become the best-selling jazz album for Blue Note Records. The album was recorded in collaboration with a bunch of rising jazz stars, students from Howard University where he graduated from. Many of the artists had already played alongside Byrd on Blackbird. There's Chuck Rainey on bass, Harvey Mason on drums, Roger Glenn on flute and so forth. The music is melodic and slick. Also, there's a mashup of some of Byrd's original compositions. At the time, Byrd was experimenting with a new sound that incorporated R&B and funk. Many of his later albums like Fancy Free and Electric Bird were also an example of this style. The music is very nostalgic, featuring stunning electric piano music, percussion, flute music and haunting vocal. Trending right now on the Billboard Jazz charts is a great album called Gets Gilberto. This is a great bossa nova album and one of the best-selling jazz albums of all time. The album was released in 1963 and sees a collaboration between two of the greatest musicians from the bossa nova genre, João Gilberto and Stan Getz. The album went down in history as one of the best bossa nova albums of all time, and one of the singles from the album, The Girl from Ipanema, became one of the biggest hit singles in history. Many of the songs in the album also went on to become jazz standards, from O Grande Amo, a cover of Desafinado and Corcovado. The music is dreamy and romantic and impressionistic, and is inspired by other legends like Jerry Mulligan, Chet Baker and Miles Davis. This album bridges the gap between Brazilian music and cool jazz. The album went on to win 4 Grammys upon release. The first one's called Pacers and Spacers. This album went on to become a hit album, topping the jazz charts and peaking at number 6 on the R&B charts. In this album, Byrd explores themes like soul, funk and R&B. Another album called Stepping Into Tomorrow. This one's a great compilation of relaxing smooth jazz music. There's also a lot of improvisation and experimentation on the keyboard. So overall, a great album of jazz rock fusion that blends disco, jazz funk and smooth jazz. An album called Royal Flush. This was an iconic album for more than one reason. It was a revolutionary album in hard bop, also one where Herbie Hancock was introduced into the jazz world. The first album is called Placers and Spacers. This was another collaboration album between Byrd and the Mizell brothers. They were a production team in the 70s, comprising Larry Mizell and Alphonso Mizell. They revolutionized the shape of jazz funk at the time. The album went on to become a hit album, topping the jazz charts and peaking at number 6 on the R&B charts. In this album, Byrd explores themes like soul, funk and R&B. Artists like Isaac Hayes, Marvin Gaye and Stevie Wonder contributed to the funky soulful tinge of the songs. The music is a blend of sweeping string music, rhythmic guitars, bass and horn music. Another album called Stepping Into Tomorrow. Another collaboration with the Mizell brothers, this album was released in 1975. A great compilation of relaxing smooth jazz music. Also some great grooves. There's a lot of improvisation and experimentation on the keyboard. The opening track, We Are Together, opens up with some great interplay between Byrd and Gary Bartz on piano. There's also some great background vocals. Rock and Roll Again is a great instrumental soul song. It's vintage 60s music. I Love the Girl is a very cinematic song featuring piano and gentle percussion instrumentals. Designer Nation sees some very smooth jazz with relaxing vocals and smooth saxophone melodies, and making it a song with jazz, funk and R&B. Donald and Gary Bartz on horns in a backdrop of piano, clavinet and percussion. So overall, a great album of jazz rock fusion that blends disco, jazz, funk and smooth jazz. An album called Royal Flush. This was an iconic album for more than one reason. It was a revolutionary album in hard bop, also one where Herbie Hancock was introduced to the jazz world. So it was 1960 and Donald Byrd was a rising star in the jazz scene. He'd already performed alongside Art Blakey, John Coltrane, Horace Silver and others. On this album, he was joined by another rising star in the jazz scene, Herbie Hancock. He discovered Hancock while on tour in Chicago. Byrd was struck by Hancock's piano playing style. It was a combination of Bill Evans, Ahmad Jamal and Hank Jones as he put it. Also joining him on the tracks was bassist Butch Warren, saxophonist Pepper Adams and drummer Billy Higgins. The first tune on the album is called Hush, one of 4 original compositions on the album. This one's a combination of blues and gospel themes and typical 60s hard bop melodies. Higgins and Warren establish a swinging groove after which they proceed solo. Another great song, Georgie's, was named after a St. Louis nightclub. The song begins with a spacey intro before morphing into a swinging hard bop piece. Herbie Hancock has his own spot on the track Requiem. This was one of Herbie's own compositions and one of the first to be showcased in an album. The song begins with a gospel theme, then the other band members enter with great swinging solos. So this album was a very significant album in Byrd's compilation. Also a great album from the hard bop era. Donald Byrd was one of the leading jazz and blues trumpeters of his era. He was also a vocalist and composer. He was one of the few jazz artists who experimented with soul and funk in his music while remaining a jazz artist. He started out touring with artists like Clifford Brown, Freddie Hubbard and Lee Morgan. In the 60s, his music became more experimental but remained rooted in blues and swing. He also had a big influence on the careers of other jazz artists like Herbie Hancock and many others. His style of jazz paved the way for a lot of the fusion and smooth jazz of the 70s and 80s. His albums were varied, spanning dance, jazz and R&B. So that was some insight into his biography. Now let's talk about some of his best albums of all time. The first one's called A New Perspective. This album starts off with a gospel feel, then builds into a more pop-oriented sound. There's 5 songs in the album, each one gospel and blues oriented. This one's a concept album, one that tells a story through the music, each song a build-up to a different chapter of the narrative. Another album called Blackbird. This album peaked at number 36 on the Billboard charts upon release. Also, the title track made the Hot 100. It's a very funky album. Another album called Stepping Into Tomorrow. This one's a great compilation of relaxing smooth jazz music. Also some great grooves. There's a lot of improvisation and experimentation on the keyboard. So overall, a great album of jazz rock fusion that blends disco, jazz, funk and smooth jazz. And an album called Street Lady. This album was recorded in collaboration with a bunch of rising jazz stars, members of Byrd's alumni from Howard University where he graduated from. With this album, Byrd was experimenting with a new sound that incorporated soul, R&B and funk. The music is very nostalgic, featuring stunning electric piano music, percussion, flute music and haunting vocals. So that was some insight into the life and times and best hits of Donald Byrd, and on that note we've come to an end of this week's episode of the Weekend Jazz Update with Joshani Silva. Don't forget you can check out the archives of today's program on my YouTube channel, the Weekend Jazz Update with Joshan. So on that note, I'll see you again next week. Have a great week ahead.